Problem number 1. The graph of the equation is shown below. For what value or values of x is y equal to 0? So that's pretty straightforward. We know that y is equal to 0 anywhere on the x-axis. So there's a spot, 1, and there's another point, 5. And we look down at our choices and we see x equals 1 and x equals 5 is letter D. Problem number 2. What is the axis of symmetry of the parabola y equals x minus 5 squared plus 3? Well, the axis of symmetry, if you recall, on a parabola is where this imaginary line, known as the axis of symmetry, goes right through the vertex. And in this case, it's going to be x equals, well, whatever value x is at the vertex. So we need to know the vertex. Well, using the vertex formula, we know that h, k, that should be a k, is our vertex. Looking at the problem, we see that 5, now be careful, it's not negative 5 because the equation already has a minus. So it's just positive 5 and positive 3. Our vertex is 5, 3. Which means our graph here that I drew is wrong. It should actually be up 3. So let's draw it in blue now. And we'll do some imaginary numbers here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2, 3. Our vertex would be here, and it would go up like this. But our axis would be right here, and it would go through x equals 5, which is letter D. Problem number 3. What is the axis of symmetry of the parabola? Make it a little smaller there. Y equals x squared plus 6x plus 2. And we learned something, or we came across a formula to find the x-coordinate of the vertex. So again, the axis of symmetry goes through the vertex. To find out the axis of symmetry, we use this formula right here. X equals negative b over 2a. Well, what do the b and a correlate to? Well, in standard form, we know that equations are written as y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Looking at our problem, the coefficient of x squared is 1, so a equals 1. The coefficient of x is 6. So b equals 6, and the coefficient, or the constant at the very end is 2, so c equals 2. Again, there's no variables in this a, b, and c. These are just the coefficients, just numbers. I go down to my formula. I put negative b, in this case negative 6, over 2 times a, and a is 1. Negative 6 over 2 reduces to negative 3. And I have x equals negative 3 for answer A. Problem 4, y equals x minus 3 squared plus 2. We want to find the vertex. The vertex formula again is as written here, where h and k is our vertex. We see that 3 has been substituted into the h, again not negative 3, just 3. And we see that 2 has been substituted in for k, and hence our vertex is 3, 2, which is letter C. Problem 5. Which ordered pair represents the vertex of the parabola y equals x squared minus 10x plus 21? Again, we use the vertex, or the formula, to find the x-coordinate of the vertex, which is x equals negative b over 2a. Knowing that the standard format of an equation is ax squared plus bx plus c, we recognize that in this problem, a is 1. I have a little problem there. There we go. B is equal to negative 10. And c, which isn't important for this problem, is equal to 21. So using the formula, we substitute negative 10 in for b, so we have negative 10. And on the bottom we have 2 times a, which is 1. Continuing to simplify, we get positive 10 over 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So x equals 5. Looking at our choices, we know this eliminates A and eliminates B. So we can now take 5 and plug it into the equation. Change colors here. And y equals, replace x with 5, 5 squared, minus 10 times 5, plus, give myself a little more room here, plus 21, and y equals 5 times 5, 5 squared is 25, minus 50, plus 21, and y equals, well, 25 minus 50 is negative 25, plus 21, and so y equals negative 4. We'll put negative 4 right there, and we see the answer is going to be C for this problem. Problem 6. Which equation best represents the graph below? Well, looking at the equation, we can see that it is pointed downwards, which tells us this parabola is a negative. Looking at our choices, this quickly eliminates C and it eliminates D, leaving us with A and B. Looking at the graph, the vertex is here. Well, we see that's lined up with 2, so we'll make a note here, it's 2. And we can estimate that it's about 3. So it's positive 3 on the y-axis. Looking at our choices here, we can see that letter B has a positive 3 as opposed to letter A, which has a negative 3. So B is going to be our choice. Remember, the vertex formula is y equals A times x minus h squared, but then plus k. So when we plug 3 into the equation, it remains positive 3. Problem number 7. Which of the following ordered pairs is a point on the parabola y equals x minus 1 squared plus 5? If one of these is a point on the parabola, then we should be able to substitute the numbers into the equation, and it should work out or simplify correctly. So let's start with letter A. I'm going to substitute 2 into x and 7 into y. So letter A gives us 7 equals 2 minus 1 squared plus 5. I know that 2 minus 1 is 1, and 1 squared is 1, plus 5 is 6. This is obviously not true, so the answer cannot be A. We move on to the next one, letter B. We'll do letter B and we'll pick green here. So letter B. We're going to substitute 9 in for y and 3 in for x. And this looks like it's going to be a winner because 3 minus 1 is 2 squared. 2 squared is 4. And 4 plus 5 is 9. This is true. Since it's true, we know that B is our answer. And the other two are going to be incorrect because there's only one solution. Okay, we've seen all the problems now, and now we're getting some repeat problems, so we'll quickly solve these. I'm going to go a little quicker since we've discussed how each of these problems work. So number 8. What are the solutions of the quadratic equation x plus 2 times x plus 5 equals 0? We ask ourselves, what can we plug into x plus 2 to get 0? Well, to get 0, we need the opposite of 2, which is negative 2. So that eliminates letter C and letter D, which both have positive 2's. We look at our next one, and we say, well, to get this to 0, x has to be the opposite of 5, which is negative 5, and we can see A has negative 5, and B doesn't, and that's how we get our answer for A. Number 9, what are the solutions of the equation x squared minus 3x minus 10? There's many ways to do this. We'll do it by factoring. So we ask ourselves, as we factor, we know x goes here and here. Can we think of two numbers that multiply to negative 10 but also add up to negative 3? And off the top of my head, I know that negative 5 times positive 2 is negative 10, and negative 5 plus 2 adds up to negative 3. So again, they have to add up to the middle term and multiply to the last term. Using the same thinking from problem 8, well, we have to plug in numbers that will give us 0. So what can we plug in to x minus 5 to get 0? What is the opposite of minus 5 or a negative 5? And it would have to be a positive 5. B and D give us positive 5, whereas A and C give us negative 5. We go to the next part of the problem. X plus 2 equals 0. We ask ourselves, well, what is the opposite of a positive 2? It would be a negative 2. And we see that answer on B. And that is our answer. Lastly, number 10, which point lies on the parabola defined by y equals 2x squared plus 5x minus 3? Well, similar to a problem on the previous slide, we have to plug in numbers in order to figure out which one solves correctly or which one will simplify correctly. Well, doing a little quick look, I can see that if I plug 0 in for x, remember the first term is x and the second term is y, that this will become 0, this will become 0, and I'll be left with y equals negative 3. But this says negative 2. So just by looking at it, I can tell that A is going to be incorrect. So let's try letter B. Plugging 1 in for the x's and 5 in for the y. So letter B, 5 equals 2 times 1 squared plus 5 times 1 minus 3. And we simplify, and we see that 1 squared is 1, and 1 times 2 will be 2. And 5 times 1 is 5, and we still have minus 3. 2 plus 5 is 7, minus 3 is 4, and that is obviously incorrect. So we know the answer cannot be B. So we move to the next one, letter C, which is 2 and 14. And I'm going to take this and make it a little bit smaller now that we've seen it to give myself more space. And letter C, I'm going to put 14 in for y and replace all the x's with 2's. Well, 2 squared is 4, so I get 2 times 4. And 5 times 2 is 10, and we still have minus 3. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 plus 10 minus 3, well, 8 plus 10 is 18, minus 3 is 15. And I ran out of room, but we get 14 equals 15, and that's obviously wrong. So C is not the answer, and that means D has to be the answer, which it is. And if you plugged it in, you should get, well, put 3 in for x, and 3 squared is 9, times 2 is 18, plus 5 times 3 is 15, so 18 plus 15 is 33. Take away the last 3, it is 30. And you can work that on your own and see that it works out just fine. Problem 11. What is the equation of a parabola whose vertex is negative 5, 4? Well, we know the vertex formula is y equals a times, oops, little mistake there. There we go. Y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And the vertex is hk. Well, this problem says that the vertex is negative 5, positive 4. So we would substitute these into the original equation. So y equals x minus, now remember it's negative 5, so I'd put a negative 5 here, squared, and then plus 4. And we know that when we have a negative minus a negative, it becomes a positive. So in this case, positive 5 squared plus 4. So our vertex, or the equation of the parabola is y equals x plus 5 squared plus 4, which is letter C. Problem 12. Problem number 12 is a problem that we're not going to have to worry about for the test, so we're going to skip that right now. We'll come back to that later on. Problem 13. Dave correctly solved the equation x squared plus 6x equals negative 8 by completing the square. Which equation is part of his solution? Well, let's take the equation and rewrite it. X squared plus 6x equals negative 8, and let's complete the square ourselves. To complete the square, we take half of the middle term, which in this case is 6, half of that is 3, and we square it. So we add 3. 3 squared is 9, so we add 9. But if we do it to the left side, we have to also do it to the right side of the equation, so we add a 9. Factoring the first part, we get x plus 3 squared. And again, we know the term here is going to be half of this. Half of 6 is 3. On the right side, we get negative 8 plus 9, which is positive 1. At this point, looking at problem number 13, the question is which equation is part of this solution, and we can recognize that right here, part C is where he is at. The problem isn't solved, but again, it's just asking which part or which choice there is part of his solution, and we can see it is C and not the others. Okay, by now you should have a general understanding of how these problems work, so we'll go through these quickly. What is a solution for the equation 2x squared minus 5x minus 12 equals 0? Well, we're just going to plug these numbers in to see which one gives you 0. Another way to do this is to factor this, and we'll do it by factoring just to kind of refresh our brains. And we talked about the one trick we use in algebra class, factoring with the cloud. And factoring with the cloud, we take that first number and we multiply it by the last term. And now we get x squared minus 5x minus 24 equals 0. We now factor this, looking for a number that multiplies to negative 24 and adds up to negative 5. And thinking about it, I can see it's going to be a minus 8 and a positive 3. 3 minus 8 is negative 5, and 3 times negative 8 is negative 24. The trick with the cloud is we're not going to put just x's in the front, but we're actually going to put 2 x's in the front. So we're bringing that 2 back from the cloud. We now divide by anything they have in common, or a common factor. 2x plus 3 does not have a common factor, so it stays the same. But on the other problem, we see that 2 and 8 can both be divided by 2. And when we do that, we end up with x minus 4 equals 0. This goes back to earlier problems, and we ask ourselves, well, what could we plug in to x minus 4 to get a 0? Well, the opposite of minus 4, or negative 4, is a 4. And we see that choice right here for D. To take this a step further, well, what problem could we Or what could we substitute into the first one to get 0? And we could do a little math. Okay, well 2x plus 3 equals 0, and I would subtract 3 from both sides, so I would get a negative 3, and I would divide by 2, and I would get negative 3 over 2, which is not an option. They give you positive 3 over 2, but that's incorrect. So the answer is D. Problem number 15, again, we'll factor here. 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. Again, you could plug in each of the solutions to find out which one equals 0, but that could be a tedious process. Here we get to the answer quickly. So again, using the cloud method, we multiply 2 times 3, and we end up with x squared plus 5x, and 2 times negative 3 is now negative 6. We factor this, looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 6 and add up to positive 5. Sometimes this one's a little tricky, but it's going to be positive 6 and minus 1. 6 minus 1 is 5. 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. Again, we're factoring with the cloud, so it's not just an x we're going to put in front, but a 2x because that's the number or the lead coefficient. We look to divide or factor out, or divide out in this case, a common factor. It's going to be 2. And I end up with x plus 3. 2x minus 1 does not have a common factor, so it remains the same. Looking at x plus 3, I can see that the solution is going to be negative 3, which is the opposite of 3. So negative 3, x equals negative 3, sorry about that. That is not a choice, so I got to look at my next one. And we could solve, or another way to look at it is, what's the opposite of negative 1? It's positive 1, and we divide it by the coefficient there, which is 2. And you can do a quick algebraic equation there to find that, but it's 1/2. Then we look at our choices, and we see it's letter B. Problem 16, Anna correctly solved the equation 6x squared minus 5x minus 4 equals 0 by factoring. Which equation is part of her solution? So we need to factor this, and I suggest we use the cloud method again. So a lot of cloud here. Take our 6 and multiply it by 4. X squared minus 5x minus 24 equals 0. And we factor. What multiplies to negative 24 and adds up to negative 5? Well, negative 8 and positive 3. And again, we got to bring the coefficient, which is 6, down with us. And we look to simplify. I see that 6 and 8 are both divisible by 2. So that reduces to 3x minus 4. I see that 6x plus 3 are both divisible by 3. And I'm left with 2x plus 1 equals 0. And it's not asking me to solve, it's asking me to find what part of which equation is part of the solution. And I look for the one that matches, and I can see that's going to be letter C. Problem 18 is a very simple problem. The solution set of a quadratic equation is 5 and 2. What is the quadratic equation? Well, if you think about it, when we were looking for the answers, we were always looking for the opposite. For example, if we had something that looked like this, x plus 3 and x minus 7 equals 0, well, then we would say, what is the opposite of 3? Negative 3. What is the opposite of negative 7? Positive 7, and we would get our solutions, and we make that little solution set that we have a hard time with. Well, now we're doing the opposite. They're giving us the solutions. They're saying one of the solutions is negative 5 and one of the solutions is 2. So you ask yourself, what is the opposite of negative 5? Well, it's positive 5. And what's the opposite of positive 2? It's negative 2. And we can see that our answer is letter C. Problem 19, you guys should get excited to see this problem. It should be an easy answer. This is a parabola. It's pointing upwards. It's opening upwards, so it's positive. So the first thing we're going to do is go through and cross off any of them that have a negative, and we see the negative right there. That tells us it points downwards, and that's the only one. So we're getting rid of A. Now we have to find the vertex, since all of these are in vertex form. We have to find the x-coordinate, which is going to be positive 3. The y-coordinate looks like it's close to about negative 4, just in front of negative 5. So our vertex is 3, negative 4. Well, letter B has a positive 4, so we know that's incorrect. And now we have to decide, is the answer going to be C or D? It's easy to pick C because we have positive 3, but we have to remind ourselves that it's the opposite of what we see. If we plug 3 into the equation, then it should result in negative 3, and our answer is D. And the reason is the equation, again, of a parabola is y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And when we put negative 4 into that equation, it would go here, minus 4. But if we put positive 3 into this equation, well, that's not going to change the subtraction sign or the minus sign. It's still going to be there, and the 3 goes there, and we can see how that matches up with letter D.